Okay. Our next featured speaker is Bob Davis. Bob's a radio talk show personality. He says it's news talk, as he corrected me. I first became familiar with Bob when he and Tom Emmer did the morning show, the Davis and Emmer show on AM 1130, which I listened to every chance I could get. I liked it better when it was on FM, because I could actually get it, but they switched to AM and it became harder to get. But Bob is recently kind of moved over to 21st century digital media, and he is podcasting his commentary. And you can listen to Bob's commentary 7x24 by 365 on the Bob Davis Podcasts with an S.com.
Longest URL.
So let's give Bob Davis a warm Rochester welcome. Here you go, Bob.
Thanks. I don't have any jokes. Just the federal government in Washington. That's the only joke that I have. I'm going to start real quickly and just tell you what a podcast is. A podcast is, if you don't know, it's any kind of programming delivered digitally and produced and delivered digitally over the internet. So it can be Sonny's YouTube podcast, which is video, or my audio podcast, which is available at bobdavispodcast.com. When I was a kid, my mom used to tell me that there were little people in radio, and that got me very interested in radio because I thought that there were little people actually in there. The little people have gotten even tinier, and they're in here. And in the 21st century, all the creativity is going over to digital. And you know, we've heard a lot, if you've been in the newspaper business, you know that digital has disrupted newspapers, and it is now disrupting broadcast television and broadcast radio. And it's really exciting because you can say and do what you want, and there's nobody to tell you can't, and there's nobody to move you to scratchy old AM if you do things that are a little too frightening, like threaten their sports station. So we're a little protected in podcasting from the vagaries of fools in the radio business. We are in the midst of a technology revolution in this country, a second industrial revolution. It's significant. It's going to be more significant than the original industrial revolution, and it's going to change everything. Nothing that you see today will be as it is today in 50 years. And that's something that people really, you can't say it enough, and people don't understand it. And I don't have enough time to go into all of the details of the technology changes, but they're significant. Communications, materials, biotech, all sorts of things, 3D printing, these are changing the world in significant ways. And our government is singularly poorly positioned for the future. And if we don't adapt to the future, which means a decentralized, more Jeffersonian republic, this country will fall apart because the technology will destroy it. It's so disruptive. So I'm super excited about technology. But this is a tax rally, right? This was supposed to be a rally about taxes. And I'm going to start by suggesting that we need to be careful what we pray for because we just might get it. The DFL just reduced taxes in the state of Minnesota. Should we have a big round of applause for the Democrats that were reducing the taxes in the state of Minnesota? No, we're not going to applaud them? The Democrats in New York State just reduced the taxes in the state of New York. Isn't that what we want? We want a reduction in taxes. And it's the Democrats doing it. How is it possible? The thing here, the question here is power. The issue is not taxation, and I've been saying this for years, and I've been saying it to the Taxpayers League, and I've been saying it to the Republicans, because all they do is go out and say, Grover Norquist, reduce taxes, Grover Norquist, reduce taxes. The power to tax is the issue. It's not taxation. It's the power to tax. We have a progressive tax system in this country that is a disaster. It's gotten to the point now where politicians go to Washington and they tell you anything. They will tell you anything to get you to vote for them. They'll tell you that they're going to fix education. They'll tell you that they're going to give you farmers a better subsidy. They're going to help people because government's here to help. They'll tell you whatever it takes, and they'll tell you they're conservatives. Then they vote for the train. Or they tell you that they're conservatives, like Jim Abler, and they go out and they vote for Minshore. And they make the Obamacare exchange in Minnesota happen. And instead of voting for a right-to-work bill that would give you a chance to actually reduce the price of education in the state, they voted to tell people whether or not they could get married. And that was a huge tactical mistake, and that's the Minnesota State Legislature. So when we talk about lower taxes, and that is supposedly the mark of a conservative, what we need to be talking about is the power to tax. People in this country are getting tired of this government. And if you want a great example of it, the Bundy Ranch is a great example of it. What happened on the Bundy Ranch? Because the story is not being told in the mainstream media. What happened on the Bundy Ranch is Harry Reid, who is the Senate Majority Leader and the senior senator from Nevada, has a son who works for a law firm, and his client is the government of China. And China, some company from China, which is probably owned by the government of China, wanted Mr. Bundy, the land that Mr. Bundy's cattle were grazing on. And so the Bureau of Land Management, with all of their brand new Ford trucks and their army camouflage and their snipers and their special tough guy sunglasses, went down there and they said, we're taking your cattle. 20 years ago, they could have done that and nobody would have said a word. You would have had Waco 20 years ago. They would have shot the guy. You would have had Ruby Ridge 20 years ago. What happened? The digital media, not the mainstream media, not even the broadcast media, they wouldn't even touch it. The digital media broke the story, covered the story, and told people what was going on. And people went out there and said, no more. And they backed down. They backed down because that is corruption. And I'm going to tell you something. They're all Harry Reids. I don't care if they're Republicans or Democrats. And this is what we've got to get through our heads. They're all Harry Reids sooner or later. So what do we have to do? We have to reduce the power of the government, specifically the federal government. So this is what you need to ask the candidates when they come down here and they like to spread their little silver webs about all the wonderful things they're going to do for education and how they're going to reduce taxations on the margin, whether it's Paul Reid or Paul Ryan. And I'm sorry if it's harsh, and I'm sorry if it's painting with too broad a brush, as Tom used to tell me. But this is the way it is. We're not going to fix this by changing things on the margin in Washington. What do I mean by that specifically? It's just like what Sonny said. We don't want to do any kind of we want to reduce welfare or safety net funding. Instead of $950 billion, we'll make it $925 billion. We'll reduce things on the margins, and that will make things better. And the truth is, reducing taxes on the margins may make things better. But in 50 years, it's not going to make things better. It just moves the ball. Let's just take the Green Bay Vikings analogy. It moves the ball back to their 20. Next time we have another game, they push it back to our 20. They score, we score, and we're not getting anywhere because they're not getting the message. And people, a couple of statistics, I'm kind of jumping around. There was a story 2 days ago that said the average person in this country, and it's a huge percentage of people, can't come up with $2,000 in cash if they had to in an emergency. We have not seen wages increase. We are seeing moribund economic growth. We're seeing 1.5 to 2% economic growth, and every time something happens, there's an excuse for it. Well, we had a bad winter. Well, it was green shoots, but then winter came. Or this happened or that happened. We're not seeing economic growth, and the average person in this country is struggling to start businesses. Now we're starting to worry about, are we going to pay the penalty if we don't have Obamacare? You have increased taxes, Tax Freedom Day. As long as this is a tax rally, Tax Freedom Day comes something like 3 days later this year than it did last year. Why? They're increasing taxes, significantly increasing taxes, and not just in the federal state government, but in the state governments as well. And most of the money in the state goes for education. And we pass it every time because, God forbid, that's like the third rail of politics. Oh, I'm going to make the schools better. How much better do you want to make the schools? How much more money will it take to make the schools perfect before they suck everything away from people? And people are getting really angry about this. Now, in Minnesota, we don't... I'll tell you a little story about Minnesota. I had a friend who ran for lieutenant governor back in the 1950s. He was a war hero. And he came in on day 5 of Normandy, and he had a Silver Star. So they said, his name was McDonough, John McDonough. And they said, we're going to have you run for lieutenant governor because you're a war hero. So he gets up there, and he went up to northern Minnesota, and he made a speech. And he came off the stage, and everybody was doing this. And he came off the stage, and he said to Hubert Humphrey, they hated me. And Hubert said, no, that means they love you, because it was in northern Minnesota. That is the way the Romans used to pick their generals. They would slam their legs on the ground. So in Minnesota, we may not be as expressive, but people are getting very irritated with the federal government. And I think it's very interesting and very important. So a couple of quick suggestions, and then maybe I can take some questions. I don't know if we have enough time. Want to point out something. Last week, The Democrats in Washington and a bunch of other people were very upset because Caterpillar avoided paying something like, I don't know, it was some ridiculous amount of money, $40 billion in taxes or $14 billion in taxes by moving their money through the Netherlands and offshore. Apple Computer has 1.5, I think Apple Computer has something like almost $1 trillion, if not a little over $1 trillion in money overseas. It's actually the whole tech sector. Apple has billions overseas. The current tax rate for corporations in this country is 35%. And of course, most companies, if they can avoid paying that tax, do so legally, just like all of us in this room. We avoid paying as much as we can pay legally by spending $500 million a year to employ tax return specialists to prevent the government from getting as much money as possible. And here we have President Obama, who is so concerned about the 1% and inequality in this country. So President Obama made something like $480,000 last year between selling the book and being the president and everything else. That's the 50% tax bracket. What bracket do you think he paid his taxes in this year? He paid in the 20% tax bracket. So here we have the president who is so concerned about the 1%, who's made sure that he also legally avoided paying tax at the 50% tax rate. That puts him in the top 1%. So I think that's a sign of the times. Finally, as I said, they're all Harry Reid sooner or later. What do we do? And I'm going to just make a couple suggestions for what we need to do that has to happen. First of all, we need to get rid of the progressive tax system in this country. We need a flat tax or a fair tax, a fair consumption tax. And we need it now. And we need every single one of these Republicans, unless they're Republicans in name only, we need them to be up there saying, I support the fair tax or I support a flat tax. What do I mean by that? 15% flat tax, no deductions, no money sent back, no transfer payments, and that includes the fair tax. Because the fair tax has a transfer payment for the people who don't, there'd still be a group of people that wouldn't pay tax because, God forbid, they should have to go out and buy things and pay a 25% tax. No deductions, no changes. Now in Hong Kong, there's a 15% flat tax and you pay a check. You write a check to the government so that you know how much, and that's why one of the reasons Hong Kong, God forbid, the People's Republic of China, which owns Hong Kong, it's one of the freest places in the world to do business. That's a shame. We should be ashamed of ourselves that this country is way on that list of free places to do business in the world. And why? Taxes and regulations. So that's the first thing that has to happen. Number one. The second thing is we have to end crony capitalism. What's crony capitalism? It's the big companies paying off the Democrats and the Republicans in Washington to fence off competition, which is one of the reasons we have Obamacare. We have Obamacare because the insurance companies said, we're going to fix it so we have what we call a free market, but it's only going to be for us. We don't want to have anybody else. We wouldn't want to have insurance sold across state lines. And they paid these people off, and they got this from it. We need to end this with, we need to end corporate taxes, because that's the other way that they do it, is they get the government to give them tax breaks to do things. So no more corporate taxes at all. And then we could have them bring their money back to the United States and repatriate it at no charge. That's probably an anathema in Washington. We need a private retirement savings system. We need to end Social Security and privatize Social Security. The younger people in this room, they're not going to get a cent from Social Security because the country's going to be broke by then. We need to go to, Chile has a private system. There's no reason why the government should be administering that. We need to repeal Obamacare completely. And every single one of these Republicans should pledge to repeal it on day one. And if they don't, or if they obfuscate, throw them the hell out of here. They should be in there saying, we are going to repeal this bill entirely. And you say, replace it with what? It's very simple to replace it. All they have to do is allow insurance companies to sell insurance across state lines and let you buy insurance the way you buy car insurance. Or for that reason, I'm going to get pet insurance. You know, you can get pet insurance at Petco for about $150 a year, and, you know, I mean, I figure I went to a Petco, we took my son's dog to a Petco, and it was actually pretty nice. It was like a doctor's office in 1950. So, I'm going to get pet insurance. Why can't we have human beings insured that way? Why does it have to be dogs? It's easier to insure your dog than a human being. It's ridiculous. What else? We should eliminate the EPA. That way we wouldn't have... I think we should eliminate the Federal Department of Education. There is no reason why the federal government should be involved with your education, especially when we're getting things like Common Core and so forth. And I think we need to pass the right to work bill in this state.
Yeah.
I look at the land, I look at the free land of Wisconsin. I know it's difficult over here in the Soviet Union, but over in West Germany, which is Wisconsin, this is East Germany. Over in West Germany, they have a $1 billion surplus which they're returning to the people of Wisconsin because a very courageous man named Scott Walker stood up and fought for that. So I guess we should be happy that we've made it to April 14th. Anybody here that hasn't filed their taxes yet? My dad used to, oh my God, my dad used to, it was midnight, we got to get this to the post office. And now my ex-wife and I have a fight every year because it used to be we could never file on time because we were always fighting. So, and we're friends, it's good, but now I call her up because I always file in January if I can to get ahead of her, and I always call her and go, I'm going to get so much money back. It's such a weird thing that we have this tax thing. So congratulations on making it through another year, and let's hope that we can actually be free in America in the future, and thank you.